Thank you. And so we have half an hour now. If we want to take all of it for some questions, for some comments, you don't have to ask a question. You could offer, your own perspective, your own comments, if you'd like to do so. I'll just start by saying, it's interesting, Umberto, because the corporate, what we in the U.S. call the for-profit universities, have not been successful. And precisely for the reasons that you pointed out, that they're enormously expensive and the students often leave with enormous debt. And that has made them incredibly unpopular because they're not always employable at the level that would allow them to repay that debt. So the outcomes of the education that they receive are not particularly promising, and so there's been a tremendous cultural backlash, social backlash against the corporate universities as greedy and impractical. So I don't know if that's going to happen as well in Australia, and I don't know about the situation in the UK around those specifically for-profit universities, but it's certainly in the US they're not very successful at the moment. So please, just this is yes, please, just jump up and shout out a question or comment. Okay. Yes, he's Matthew's going to be bringing around microphone.
Yeah. So my name is Shada Tamami, and I'm from Saudi Arabia. I just want to give a comment about what you were saying about the education system. I work in a nonprofit university at Princess Noura University. It's the largest female university in the world, so it's very female dominated. And I work in the Department of Applied Linguistics, so I understand the linguistic kind of part. Um, uh, well, what we do in the department now, as an inclusive and work participation for the students and their future, we're applying the SDGs, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 15 goals, which were like included in part of your presentation. And it's showing great results because we've been doing it for 2 years now. And we're teaching students about poverty. We're teaching them about education and what kind of skills can they apply in making the world a better place. And I would recommend that for anyone who's interested. And it's like already organized in the SDGs and how you can implement it in your teaching. And you would see like wonderful results, as in not having the university as a teaching place. No, it should be an inclusive environment, a home for the students and a place of change, I guess. So that's just sharing an experience, I guess, and how as linguists we can play around with languages and find ways to problem solving and encouraging students to find ways to cooperate in such international matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. That's a great comment, and I certainly like the approaches that use SDGs in the teaching and that bring out that awareness. I guess my comment, just going back to my presentation, is that it's great. It's great to do that, but that you really have to think about the fact that your students are really smart, and that if you preach SDGs within teaching, but if the students see that your institution operates in ways that are removed from that in one way or another, then they will still see through it. And what they will end up learning is basically that the world is a bad place because you're being lied to. And maybe that's a good learning because maybe that's what the world is about. But so absolutely, I hear you. It's a great approach, but it has to be done sincerely. That goes back to my last comment.
Yes, please. Just sorry. Yes, please, right here and then over here. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Arsha from Darussalam University of Indonesia. I would like to thank doctors in front of us for those nice speech. And I would like to ask Dr. Donald Hall. I really like it when you mentioned that we have to widen our knowledge by meeting new people, hearing different opinions, and challenging our knowledge to really gain new ones. By the way, based on the book titled Talking to Stranger by Malcolm Gladwell, he described that when we meet new people And surely, our own perceptions sometimes could lead to big misunderstandings about the new person that we just met. And I actually have no problem about meeting new people from different culture or different subject of studies. But what should I do if I am in the receiving end? If, for example, when I meet someone new, but they already act negatively towards me, and what should I do so they could hear my opinion? Because just see my face, they already act negatively. Maybe you could have some opinions about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll put a plug in, by the way. Tomorrow we're doing an interactive session on global citizenship. So please try to come to that if you can, because we're going to explore more of these same topics. But I agree with you completely because, you know, in productive forms of conversation, what we do is we allow others to challenge our prejudices. In other words, those prejudgments we have made about them because of what they look like, where they come from, their accent, their appearance, or anything else. Because all of us, we make prejudgments. I mean, we anticipate something about what is going to occur because that's a natural learned tendency in our lives in terms of how to keep ourselves safe. For instance, if you're if you're in a new city and you don't know where you're going and it's dark and you're lost, you can obviously want to be self-protective. So you prejudge what could happen. And that is a strategy. But when we're interacting with another person unlike ourselves, and this goes back to the ideal situation, we allow the other person to challenge those preconceptions. And if we're honestly interested in learning, then those challenges change us and change the way we understand the world. What happens if the other person is not open to that? And I've encountered that my entire life, because again, coming as someone who was a political activist who worked in gay and lesbian rights causes, who, oftentimes you would be met with a certain set of assumptions about me because of those facts if they found out about it, then, you know, you cannot force another person to be open like that. You can try to continue to explore if you have the luxury of time. The differences, why the differences exist, um, where there are commonalities. But I think you're absolutely right. In a quick situation where you are confronted with a certain set of assumptions about you, sometimes it's impossible to overcome that resistance to allow to, the sort of prejudice that we bring to the situation. And then that's where, again, I think sometimes you have to be very self-protective because encounters with difference are very risky situations. And sometimes they can be very dangerous situations. And if you begin to, and the unfortunate truth is, if you begin to sense that the other person is not going to let go of their prejudices, are entrenched in them, and actually those prejudices could lead to violence, you actually have to walk away. I mean, that's when you have to become very self-protective. But as educators, ideally, we see our role as educating others, and some people are very open to change over time. But you have to test whether that is actually possible and the best avenue to get there. Thank you for your question.
Thanks so much, Prof. Ansaldo. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it well. Thanks for your presentation. Very informative, and I've learned a lot from it. But I just want to ask you a question. Is it possible for one institution to integrate the two or the three or the four? Because you gave us 5 different focus of the institutions. So is it possible to integrate and to move forward? If it's possible, what can be the way of integration? Because I can see really that those 5 I'm just looking at my institution. I'm sorry that I did not introduce myself. I'm Shakespeare Jipambo. I'm from South Africa. I'm working in South Africa, but originally I'm from Malawi. Yeah, so I'm representing two countries when I'm here. Yeah, but just to assist me with that question, whether it's possible to integrate 2 or 3 models that is represented here. Thanks, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just clarify. You are wondering whether a university should try and attempt all those things in one go, or whether different institutions could focus on different aspects of the challenges and the aspects of a better future. Is that what you're asking? One. Okay, I get. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Exactly. Let's say copy what undergraduate author.
yeah, absolutely. It is my belief that it would be better if more universities tried to be more focused and more specialized on one aspect or another of education, rather than a tendency that you have seen in a number of institutions, especially I'm thinking now about Western Europe, to some extent North America, and certainly Australasia, to try and do everything. Because when you have financial constraints and when you have decreasing subsidies, then trying to do everything means inevitably that you will do a number of things rather poorly. And in a sense, many universities have been pushed to try and do everything out of competitiveness, out of trying to be as competitive with the others as possible. But that is not the mission of education. The mission of education is to do something and do it well. And so for me, definitely, a diversity of models is much preferable to every institution trying to do a little bit of everything.
If I could follow up, does the corporate model kill all of the others? In other words, can you be a for-profit, responsible, research-driven, liberal arts-based university, or does it negate everything else?
Thanks, Donald, because this gives me an opportunity to go back to the comment that you made about North America. And, it's quite possible that the evolution of Australian institutions is, like everything else, a phase in time that is going to change. And in fact, there has been quite a bit of criticism about the sector. But there is a stark difference between higher education in Australia and in the US. Universities in Australia are extremely young, like everything else in Australia. You're looking at this sort of 60, 70 years max. You don't have that kind of heritage of intellectualism and research that is several hundred years old. You don't have the kind of powerhouses that you have in the UK or in North America that are fierce competitors on the knowledge and teaching business. And so what has happened in Australia is that model has conquered all 39 universities. There is just that. There is no alternative. And so that probably explains the dominance right now and the extreme degrees to which it has moved. I think that they still can produce some very good research in some areas, especially the areas that are invested in by the government and by industry, and they can still deliver cutting edge teaching, again, in those areas where they know there is industry demand, but they can't do the other things. And that is crucial to me.
Hello, thank you for both of your talks. My name is James Kaizuka. I'm from the University of Leeds in the UK. So obviously I recognize many of the problems that you were talking about. We have the same kind of political discourses in the UK about how certain degrees are useless. We have this phrase, Mickey Mouse degrees, used by politicians to describe that. And sometimes newspapers, I think, just like to choose a random PhD thesis on the internet and try to tear it down. But one of the things that I found particularly interesting was a talk about students' expectations on the kind of skills that they can have after university. And I was wondering from a sort of practical perspective, as academics, how we can explain to students that the things they're learning in humanities classrooms are actually useful and will benefit them in the long term. What are the kind of strategies you use to explain that to students?
One of the ones that I found most useful is to take the graduates who have left, let's say, the university 10 or 15 or 20 years out, who had degrees perhaps in English literature or art or, or history or philosophy, and especially the ones who have become very successful. And because many of them go off to amazing careers, and have them return to campus, if not in person, you can do it virtually, you can do it by Zoom, and actually talk to students and through the students in many ways to their parents about what it was about their liberal arts education that actually empowered them. Because we have tremendously successful graduates who have gone on to careers in the entertainment industry, in the nonprofit industry, in business, in law, in politics, etc. And they are the best equipped to talk to those students about actually the foundation of their success. So I think that is one strategy. But I think the other strategy from my perspective is simply to go back to what do employers want? Employers want graduates coming from university who know how to communicate, who know how to work in teams, who know how to understand complexity, who know how to analyze data, and not just data in the sense of scientific data, but actually data from across a variety of media, and to go back to those fundamental skills that we teach when we teach in the arts or the humanities or the social sciences or language studies. So I'm not afraid myself to actually get into that very clear vocational discussion. And there was a backlash a few years ago from some, in my area, which is again English studies, humanities, who would say to me or people who hold a similar viewpoint that, oh, you're just instrumentalizing it. You're just turning English studies or language studies or X, Y, or Z studies into something that is not simply good because we should learn to sort of or think about broad concepts, etc. I said, that's going to happen anyway. If I read a novel by Dickens, or if I go and I go to an art gallery and I'm confronted by a Rothko or a Picasso or whatever, it's going to change me ideally in ways that I can't even explain necessarily. But just because that is one aspect of what we do, and what we experience in the classroom or in our, sort of our cultural lives, doesn't mean we can't also learn the practical side of how to explain something in a way that will assuage our students' fears and, again, finally assuage their parents' fears that they're never going to be able to find a job and they're going to go home and live with mom and dad for the rest of their lives. So I would just say both and. Use your successful alums, but also think about the instrumental value beyond the mind-blowing, consciousness-raising sort of value of what we do in the arts and humanities to address those very real insecurities. Umberto, do you have any thoughts on that?
Thanks. I can just share a couple of experiences that have made me realize how to shift the dial on that conversation. One was the experience of developing a sort of kind of liberal arts approach at the University of Hong Kong, where we basically changed the whole undergraduate education by introducing a first year of what we then called the Common Core. So over a period of 5 years, we designed roughly 300 courses that were all interdisciplinary in nature. They really didn't belong to any particular program or training. And the idea was that each of these would tackle some of humanity's fundamental challenges. So in the first year, students of the whole university had to do at least 4 of these courses. And the experience of the students sitting in classrooms with kids who were going to become medical doctors, kids who had chosen to do philosophy, kids who had chosen to do business, was largely an extremely positive one. They loved it. They loved confronting themselves, having chosen different paths, being interested in different ways of thinking, wanting to acquire different skill sets. They loved being in the same classroom and being introduced to issues that each of them would in the future possibly be able to contribute to from a different perspective. And in some cases, it changed their course and their choice of what to do completely. But even when it didn't do this, it was really, really good in terms of making them realize the value of the things and the thinking and the skills that happen elsewhere. The other thing that we were able to do there was to make sure that each student of the university would, at time of graduation, have made at least one experience outside of Hong Kong, whether it was just on the other side of the border, or whether in some cases where we were able to fund scholarship or donations or more ambitious trips, like I did one exactly at this very time, 9 years here in Tokyo. I took a group of students to do a 2-week stint at the Tokyo University of Foreign Studies, for example. That experience, again, really opened kids' eyes to what it means to deal with diversity, what it means to be somewhere else, what it means to be confronted by a different culture, and how if you don't have that, you're actually quite handicapped. I did probably 5 or 6 of these trips, some here in Japan, some in Sri Lanka, because I used to do fieldwork in Sri Lanka at the time, and some just on the other side of the border in China. And I haven't seen one single student that didn't come back from those trips saying, this has really changed me. This has changed a lot of the things that I'm thinking of right now, things that I want to do, and where I go with my studies. So those 2 things, I think, can be operationalized within most universities in often not particularly costly ways, but you need vision and you need will.
Okay, thank you both.
Okay, we have about 15 more minutes. So there's one back there, one up here. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Professor Paul. I'm from Ghana, but I've been in Japan for a decade now. I got a PhD in global environmental studies here in Japan. Thank you for your presentation, but one of the, it was rather a shock to me to hear that I was thinking as a US as one of the liberalized countries in the world. Quite shocked to my marrow to hear that social sciences scholars are rather under attack. But let me say that the physical sciences are very important. But what teaches our whole society together is not the scientific principles, it's about moral consciousness. To live in a peaceful world, humanities, the scholars, all those that maybe the physical sciences may be looked down upon very important. That's what I want to say in the first place. And back to a specific question regarding your presentation as a social scientist or a scholar in the field or the domain of social sciences. We do understand that the political economy of education, which the state or the politicians have a say, and the academic somehow independent doing research. So how, with specific reference to America, what exactly is in place to make sure that there is that kind of collaboration between the politicians who hold the power and the academic that hold the knowledge, such that there could be that such kind of collaboration in order to address fundamental structures or problems of society. And then back where I do come from, Ghana, one of the issues, topical issues now, is has to do with the production of knowledge in the social science areas. The argument is that we have a lot of liberal education or students who are pursuing the social sciences, who graduate in thousands, if not in millions, but the labor market is not absorbing large number of those who graduate from the humanities. So that put the question: what exactly do we get being scholars in the area of social sciences? Because we finish, as a Ghanaian, we finish normally when we don't have job to do. And so the disparity between what the labor market is actually looking for and what knowledge the university is generating, or how the university is preparing students for the labor market. There's that kind of gap. How do you address such kind of fundamental issues?
Well, thank you. And you're absolutely right. I mean, in the sense that, well, one, your first question about how what is done at universities, or the research and teaching of professors and others are or are not under the control of politicians. In the U.S., historically, we've had a very hard line between political control and what we call faculty governance, faculty governing what they teach in their classrooms and the type of research that they do. So I will say that line is under attack by some politicians and some very right-wing politicians, because they see it as fundamentally threatening. So they would like to weaken that barrier, that protection. It's marginally successful, that sort of attack, in certain parts of the country, but not in most. But that it is a very uncertain time. That's the perilous times that we're in right now in terms of American higher education. To go to your second point about, I mean, again, I believe that a liberal arts or a social sciences education or humanities or arts education are very practical, okay? But you're right, in certain contexts, there may be a labor market that cannot absorb all the students who have studied history or psychology or English literature or whatever. And this goes back to whether we can do more things than our narrow category sort of, empowers us to do. At my university, we have started new sort of add-on tracks for humanities majors and social science majors in things like data science, in coding, in computer science, and even in accounting. So you can do a degree in English literature or psychology or history, and what we call a minor, which is a secondary sort of area of specialization in accounting or coding or data sciences, that allows a student to exit the university with several skill sets that they can point to. So not every university is that possible in, but for those of us especially who are administrators, we should think about ways of doing these kinds of add-on certificates or add-on minors or other sort of practical skill-based supplements to what the students are studying when they're in their history class, their linguistics class, or their English class, because those can actually become very attractive in the job market. But I agree, we have a responsibility to look at the realities of a labor market and not think about what those realities should be, but how to tweak what we do at the university to address the realities of the labor market.
Hey, good morning, afternoon. Yeah, it's in India. It's morning still. Anyway, my name is Prem Kumar. I studied postgraduate in political science in Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India. And my comment is largely about another threat to the universities and its ideas. And by the way, Professor Ansaldo's slide on thank you was really beautiful. Anyway, like when I was studying in JNU, we used to call the campus the island of democracy. We used to speak about different ideas about equality, about like accommodating diversity, about say like accepting each other. We used to talk about that. But once we step out of the campus, like everything changes. Like outside the campus, we used to face certain kind of discrimination. Especially personally, I belong to an ethnic minority in India, and I'm a BT. I belong to Northeast India. I'll be talking more on Northeast India in my presentation. So, like when we come out of the campus, we are often recognized as either Chinese or like say something like that. We used to be or like Sinkies and all. It's a derogatory word. But anyway, but inside the campus, everyone is equal, and like everyone would treat us as equal. And in the campus, we used to say go for like protest marches whenever we felt discriminated, etc. And everything was accepted. But things have changed, I think, in the last few years. Like, so for example, like recently I visited my old campus, and there was this notice saying that around 30 meters from the administration block, there cannot be any protest. So there was this kind of a restriction. And before, like when I was studying in the in the university, like police would not enter inside the campus without the permission of the vice chancellor and the authorities, and hardly I saw any police inside the campus. But nowadays we have seen police entering the campus and capturing students, and when students protest, students are beaten up. And I think this is happening across the world as well. Like students getting beaten up, professors getting beaten up, getting arrested, etc. My question is, like, we have talked about a better future. We have been talking about, like, say, accepting one another, about different ideas. Like, I think have academicians or the intellectuals or the scholars have failed to transfer these ideas of acceptance, democracy, or equality, etc., to the larger section of the population, larger population. Like while we are talking about all these ideas inside the campus, outside the campus things change. So, like, what is the responsibility as a member of the university, as a member of the academic community? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thanks. Very good point. And in a sense, it also connects to the second question of the previous gentleman, and it's a question of what is the relationship between the university and academia and the reality out there, which is a big question. And this is something maybe as a special topic for another conference, Joe, because it really follows from what we are discussing now. And that is the next step. How do we become better as scholars, as academics, as researchers to actually communicate with the power bases out there? Because we must become better. We must be better at talking, dealing, and to some extent persuading politicians out there of our finds and of the things that we do and preach in our universities. Now, there are some universities, notably a few in North America, with amazing public policy institutions, and some that have even gone so far as to bring public policy as a fundamental element of the scholarship that is being done across the institution. And the next step would be to actually train our students in public policy, to train students to be activists in a sense, because that is really the next step. That is the bigger step, the huge challenge, that we must gain a persuasive power onto politics and onto governments out there if we want our hard work to go beyond the confines of the campus, as you very well described.
And then I'll let Joe wrap this up. But I will say that this is a topic I think tomorrow we can continue to explore around that concept of global citizenship. In other words, we're not talking about being an effective teacher in the classroom. We're talking about what does it mean for all of us to be responsible global citizens and to instill that concept of global citizenship in others around us, not only our students, but our friends, our coworkers, our parents, our children, etc. So a topic to continue to explore.